So the next speaker is John Innes, who probably knows more about kōkako than anybody else in New Zealand. He's largely led our initiatives on kōkako since the 1980s. He's an ecologist at the Landcare Research in Hamilton, with expertise in pests and the recovery of native forest birds. And last year we declared the first viable population of kōkako in the Pureora area, a battle that we've been having since the 1980s, and John sits right at the heart of that. So ladies and gentlemen, John Innes.
Thanks, Lou. Kia ora tātou. So people often confuse kōkako and kakapo, lots of K's and O's and the odd A. So kōkako, they're quite big birds, but bigger, I think, than people expect, somewhat smaller than a kakapo. But if you haven't seen a kōkako, I say to people, don't worry, but if you've never heard one sing full song in some New Zealand ngahere, then you'll die poor. So picking up the Jan Wright new wording for endangerment, IUCN classify kōkako as in serious trouble, and DOC classify them as in some trouble, but much better now, thank you. They are really found in mainly Central North Island and Northland forest dominated by tawa and kauri. They are omnivores, and fruit is a theme I'm going to come back to a bit. Fruit determines the number of nesting attempts that kōkako make. And so in good years they might make 3 nesting attempts, and in poor years they might make 1, but it's mammalian predators that determine the outcomes of those nesting attempts. And so these, in that sense, are primary and secondary factors accordingly. So most kōkako pairs try and breed every year, and the vast majority of those attempts fail. Kōkako were very abundant pre-European, but they declined swiftly after the spread of ship rats and stoats, rather simultaneously in the last couple of decades of the 19th century. And they were rather forgotten for about 90 years, and from 1970 onwards, the Wildlife Service started surveying for the birds again in Central North Island, and it set off what turned out to be a 45-year kind of recovery program, and it kind of takes that long. By the time you survey a bird at this time period and that time period, look at rates of decline, choose a level of care, imagine what the problems might be, do trials about that and implement them. That's how long it takes. Our main research periods were there in red. Our last one was about 20 years ago, and we do feel like we're running a little bit on old data now. Kōkako are declining primarily by predation, and the main pests are ship rats and possums. Possums may well be competitors for food as well. Our recovery program for kōkako is pretty simple. We control these 2 pests down to certain target levels. They are robust but simple indices of abundance, normally 5% residual trap catch for possums and 5% track and tunnel index for ship rats, and that's pretty much what we do. We do suspect that stoats are removing adult females at intervals, and we worry in the long term that browsing mammals will limit food supply for kōkako, but their current roles are not very clear. So right now we have 22 populations of this bird. Exactly half of those are relictual, they were there before, and half were put in new places by translocation, and all of these are managed. They're on 3 islands. The number has gone up enormously. We've got nearly 1,600 pairs now compared to 330 when we started, and nearly all of these are increasing. Only one of them is at carrying capacity, and that's Hauturu, which is the first island that received birds in translocation. So you won't have time to go all around this map, but you may wish to look at your favourites. The blue dots are the relic populations, and the red triangles were established by translocation. So the islands I just talked about, they're in blue, and Hauturu is kind of top right there. There's probably at carrying capacity 420 birds. Tiritirimātangi we are using to accumulate birds with Taranaki genotypes, and those in the next couple of years will be returned to that province for the first time in about 20 years. And the other one, of course, is Kapiti, which is off the Wellington coast here. And I'm going to mention Kapiti a little bit later as well. This number growth, about 11% per annum, we think should continue if we keep doing pest control. And so this is some modelling done by Dean Anderson at Landcare Research. 2025 is the end of the period of the current draft plan that we are just right now writing. It's in review. and we think by that time we're going to double the number of pairs to nearly 4,000. The 10,000 pairs is significant because 20,000 individuals is the number that in the DOC system would show that they were in no trouble at all fixed, thank you. So that's our long-term goal, is 10,000 pairs. The draft recovery plan has a lot of goals, and I've sort of picked one that I thought was most cogent for this talk, and it's to double the size of our current original and translocated populations by 2025 by increasing the scale and effectiveness of pest control. So that's obviously going to be the take-home message of this. The genetics work that I'm going to talk a bit about also reminded us that we can reconnect adjacent populations, perhaps with new or with existing corridors, and that is something that we are now pursuing. And this little rejoinder statement to this goal reminds us that we want kōkako in natural ecosystems with the other animals and plants they evolve with, and we want genetically robust populations. Now, the 250 kōkako pairs, it's 500 individuals, it's a bit out of thin air, but it's a biggish number. And at 8 hectares per pair, we think that it's 2,000 hectares, and you'll see that number appear in this slide. So it's great that you've been introduced to genetic diversity and to rare alleles in Andrew's talk. And we, I guess, share the Parliamentary Commissioner's view that in the long term, genetic diversity will assist populations to adapt to changing conditions. And we learned long ago that we can make as many kōkako as any of you would like to have, and really almost anywhere, habitat presuming, but we cannot make kōkako genes. And so we've gone through a process that's ended up with the recovery group prioritising our large relic populations as the true nest egg, the capital from which the interest that kind of translocations are will be able to mine for, we hope, forever and ever. So we've done this work with a geneticist from Otago University, who we haven't paid since 2013, but she has been fantastic. She works in Canada and does this on the side for us. And she runs a model called Allele Retain. And it turns out that the answer, unsurprisingly, is the same whether it's for a translocated population or for a relic population. You want to assist rare allele retention, you want lots of diverse founders, you want rapid population growth, and large carrying capacity. And for translocations, you also have to decide where those birds are going to come from and at what rate you're going to harvest them. So just to take you through this, I'm not going to talk to you about the whole table. These are our priorities, and I'm going to show you all the populations. And the second column shows that community groups and iwi are managing half of these sites and half of these birds now. And just if you look at the figure for managed area, we're not at 2,000 hectares for all of these sites, but the available area, the next column to the right, shows that we've got plenty of space for birds to grow into. So carrying capacity is not going to be a big issue at most sites. So those are our priority ones. They all have big bottlenecks, if you like. That is, they did not go down to really tiny numbers. The other point, if you just look at those two islands, the Hauturu, so this is 1B, 420 birds there currently, but only 9 founders. And at the moment, without more genetic work, we are loath to take birds from there, and it's very difficult to put new genetic material in. And Kapiti is an opportunity. So that's a growing population, and if we can find resources, we would like to put new founder birds into there. So just heading into the priority 2s, 3s, and 4s, you see that if you look at the smallest bottleneck, some of those numbers are getting fairly small, which is why they are lower prioritised. Every translocation is just a subsection of the genome the birds that you sampled from it, and so we rank them a little bit lower. And this has got the recovery group kind of looking over its shoulder and saying, really, we need to go back to some of the translocations that we have established and top them up. And so we are starting to do those top-ups. And we're just in a little pressure point about the source of birds. We are very keen to keep doing new translocations, and birds are going to go to Taranaki, to 2 sites probably in the next couple of years, and also to Pirongia. Because community groups manage half of sites, I just wanted to finish with a bit of a talk. I contacted all of them and just asked what perhaps DOC should contribute and what the community groups should contribute and how they found the relationship. And this is a summary of their responses. So DOC is doing a great job of most of these national things. We do national recovery, they do. This is the recovery group. The recovery group leader, of course, is a DOC employee. They have annual meetings and data is collated from all kinds of people. We'd like to do more research, resources permitting. DOC does pest control at priority sites. Sometimes it's every second year and not every year. They run aerial T&80 operations, which things that community groups can't do. We do need to do some genetic management, and it would be nice to have advocacy plans. We have not found time or resources for that, and it would be great to have another national sponsor. Community groups, of course, operate locally. They make their kōkako thrive. They monitor pests. They bring those to meetings and raise local awareness, and they do an absolutely extraordinary job for this animal. Whether people are presently happy with the relationship, it varies, of course, and it varies depending on the skills and behaviours of individuals on the two sides of this partnership, like all partnerships, and so I got some quite diverse responses. I did want to table that some of the community groups, I think, are feeling the pressure. They are feeling that they're being asked perhaps to do a bit more. They've been doing this for a long time, maybe 20 years, more than they did previously. And there were various things about perhaps training, advice about pest control, equipment they'd like to borrow. They're not very happy about paperwork, which I'm sure you would all understand. We also, the recovery group, got a little bit of flack quite reasonably about having spent 3 or 4 years getting our heads clear about genetics, and in the meantime, to some extent, doing a bit of a tai-ho on translocations. We have tried to communicate our way through that, and I hope that we're going to come out into the clear in the end. And make the point that no kōkako community groups have walked away yet. So, the take-home message really is we just need increased pest control, and Pest Free New Zealand fits so far in with this, well, there's no gap. By both DOC and community groups, these sectors are equally important, and the recovery group would like to prioritise large relic populations. We'd like a bit more funding for some research and technical sides just for this taxon. And my crazy suggestion is this thing in red. It's updated, available, research-derived, costed, best practice pest control. There are a plethora of tools, and I think some of them work and some of them don't. They are site-specific often, the combination they used, and advice that's available nationally about how to use this somewhere would be a really key contribution to the whole pest-free movement. Thank you. Oh, you missed my acknowledgements, but there was an accolade to iwi community groups and DOC who have stuck in with this animal for so long. Thank them all.